Good morning and welcome to Coach's Corner Health. We are so glad you've decided to join us today and as we continue our series about being ready to date and how to get out into the dating world to find your match. 2 weeks ago, we unpacked how to know you've found your match and the journey of discovering who you want to date and being able to recognize when the person you have been looking for shows up in your life. This week, we're going to dive into what happens when you find that person and your thoughts are they feeling it too? But before we get started, let me tell you who I am. Hi, I'm Leslie, and I'm super passionate about self care. I believe it's the lifeblood to our success in life and business, and it's why I help my clients prioritize self care so that they wake up more energized and focused to tackle their daily activities and serve their clients with confidence. Andy, tell us who you are.
Thank you, Leslie. I love your introduction and how it evolves. It impresses me every time we talk. Hello, everybody. I'm Andy Lidstone. I'm the unconditional coach. I help people with boundary issues, control issues, and various other aspects of their lives, typically around relationships of various kinds. And today's topic is one that really excites me because it's often a question we leave unanswered in our head before we go on to the next step. We don't really address this question, but almost all of us have it. When we're attracted to somebody, we wonder, are they attracted to us too? But we don't generally ask that question, especially early on. We're too shy. What happens if they say no? So let's dig into that a little bit. First of all, let's start with your experiences or your thoughts on the topic.
You like to use me as the guinea pig. I love that. Yeah. And before we get started, we missed last week, and that's just because self care is very important, and we needed to take a break. So
Mm-hmm.
just wanted to let you know that we are typically here every week, but you will find there will be a couple of times where we won't be, whether
Yep.
that's self care related or we're just taking some time, and that's
Yep.
important to make sure you put yourself first. So let's talk
Yes.
about my dating life, which is like gazillion years ago, it feels like. Because I've been married so long, it feels like I don't even know if I can actually remember. Well, I can a little bit, but so let's look at that. Yeah, it's a question I think is, to find out, are they feeling it too? Because, you, especially if you're attracted to somebody and you are like, you have those, it's like that puppy dog stage or that honeymoon stage of feelings, and the
Mm-hmm.
emotions are heightened. Your thoughts are like how much you like someone, and sometimes we're hoping and probably thinking, well, they feel it too, without really actually diving in to make sure they feel it too, because there are relationships where someone's feeling it more than the other,
Yep.
and maybe that could be a fear that you don't want to actually ask the question because you're afraid that maybe you're the one that's feeling it the most, and the person that you're attracted to doesn't really feel it the way you do. So, yeah, I think that for me, I've been pretty lucky, I would say, in most of my relationships leading up to the one that I've been in now for almost 3 decades. Um, I pretty much felt like most of the time we were on the same page. There were a couple of times we were not. And, I didn't really know to ask, or maybe I was really afraid. And like I said, I've been so far out of the dating game that it's a really hard question for me to answer, um, from, like really diving into it and thinking, well, yeah, I remember it this way. What I can say is, let's just look at, like, I've never really been someone who's had multiple relationships, but the ones that have been the long-term relationships, I can say that I could tell that they were feeling it the same way as I was. Did it last the entire relationship? Well, relationships change as we go through life, but you have the ebbs and flows, the ups and downs, and but I can say for me that from those experiences that we were on the same page. But how do you know? Like, what are your thoughts on, like, how do you know? if they really are on the same page. Because I think they were. I mean, I felt that they were on the same page without ever asking them if they were on the same page.
Yeah, for me, from my perspective, I always felt um, inadequate in understanding that. Um, I often felt, both growing up as an adult, that I lacked a lot of the social skills that a lot of other people had. I didn't pick up on the clues or the hints. I didn't pick up on the social cues that a lot of people might pick up on. Or if I tried to pick up on them, I usually got them wrong. This is what triggered me to create the unconditional boundaries that I use now, is to have clear communication and direct communication rather than the assumptions and hints that we drop. I wanted to ask direct questions. Um, and oftentimes, ever since my mid 20s, I remember asking, different people that I was interested in, I'm interested in you. Are you interested in me? You know, even the lady I married, we were together for 20 years. And I remember the night we met, we'd both been drinking and she'd approached me and, and we kind of went on from there. Then the next morning, when we both sobered up, went over to her place and we sat there looking awkwardly at each other, not remembering what we'd said the night before, but remembering that there was an attraction there. I went over to her place. It wasn't just me; it was me and a few friends from the party from the night before, who went over to her place, and she was living with a roommate. So it was a few of us that went to visit both of them, and specifically with the intention to find out what was going to happen between her and I. But we didn't remember what we said to each other. So we just kind of sat there awkwardly looking at each other until everybody left the room for random reasons. And then I asked her, I said, I remember liking you, but I don't remember what you said. She said, good, I'm glad you asked because I didn't either. But I do like you. Right. So, but there were several times that I asked and had my heart broken. Right. Because I was interested in a girl and she was not interested in me. There were several times, even the last girl I ended up dating, I said I was interested in you. And she said, and not quite no. She said, I'm not sure I'm ready to date. But then a week later, we were kissing on the couch and cuddling on the couch. So that to me said that something changed in her. But she never did say yes. She just said not no. So I am one of those ones that would ask, but usually after a girl came to me and showed interest, or at least showed what I thought was interest. And that's why I would ask, because the first couple of times I thought there was a girl interested in me and I tried to act on that and it became a bad situation. So from that point forward, I just asked. It seems like you're interested in me, or I'm interested in you. What do you think? And so in that way, it might sound like I was asking her out, but I was not that brave. I was not the kind of guy to ask a girl out. I would never ask a girl out unless I was pretty sure she was interested in me first. But I was wrong a lot of the time, so I would ask. So, it's for me, it's something that I would directly ask the question because I don't know. And to this day, I still have difficulty discovering if a woman's interested in me or not. That's why some of my best friendships with ladies are with married women, because I don't have to ask that question. Right? Like yourself. I don't have to ask, are you interested in me? Because you're married. There's an assumption that that's just not going to happen. And I feel safe that way. I feel like I can have a close relationship, close friendship with you. So in my case, I wouldn't know. So I would ask.
That's interesting that you would be so bold because just to ask that question because I think from you know past discussions we've had and even just you know male friends of mine that a lot of the fear comes from rejection of
Hmm.
asking. So to actually be bold enough to ask that question, it saves you heartache, but it also can, burst the ego too if the answer is no.
It did.
So
It didn't actually save me heart. It broke my heart every time I got a no. I was devastated for months every time I got a no. So
so
yes.
how, yeah. So how does someone then? I mean, you find somebody that you're interested in. They're showing that interest back. How do you get up the courage to just explore that to be able to ask that question?
Hmm. That's an interesting question because it sounds like courage, but in my case, it was two fears clashing. It was the fear of rejection clashing with the fear of getting it wrong. If I acted on an interest I perceived and I was wrong, I feared that I would be accused of harassing a girl, and I feared that accusation more than I feared rejection. So for me, it wasn't courage so much as a stronger fear, a fear stronger than rejection. And rejection in me was just as strong as it is in everybody else, stronger even in some cases. But that fear of being accused of harassment was a much stronger fear, right? I to this day, I still am very, very cautious around women and innuendos and possible misinterpreted comments. I'm very careful about those things because the last thing I want is for a woman to feel like I'm coming on to her when she's not wanting it. And that's anybody, whether I'm interested in them or not, or whether we're close or not. That's anybody. I'm careful about that. I don't want people to do that. That's part of what we talked about a while back. It's part of what my one of my priorities in interacting with ladies is in helping them feel safe. And this is part of that. I want them to not feel like I'm coming onto them unreasonably, which means that I'm sure I've lost several potential relationships because I wouldn't make the move.
Yeah, and that could be really hard too. So yeah, the dating world isn't easy,
No.
and it's just because we get our signals crossed. You
Hmm.
might even run into the right person at the wrong time because they're just not ready. Like you were saying, your previous relationship, she wasn't
Yeah.
quite sure
Right.
if she was ready to date, and so that and it's I guess really it comes down to being willing to get your heart broken to ask those questions so that you don't end up dating the wrong person and the right person comes along and you're not available,
Hmm.
right? But it's also not holding yourself back, that if this person is the right person but you're not sure of it and you're afraid to ask, then again you could miss out on this being the relationship that you're looking for, because
Right.
again relationships aren't easy, and once you get into a relationship it doesn't mean like you see the fairy tales, you read the fairy tale books, Cinderella and Prince Charming,
Right.
or Cinderella and the Prince, or I don't know, is it whoever they are? Like all of these stories, I can't even remember the names, but I remember the stories, and you see them like Snow White and I think Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and then her prince comes along and kisses and wakes her up, and then they go live happily ever after.
Right.
It does it yeah, it just doesn't work that way. And I think I witnessed quite a few relationships and friendships of mine watching some of my friends and some people that I wasn't really close with, but I watched as they went through wedding planning, and it was really of this. It became an obsession of having the perfect wedding, the perfect dress, the perfect venue, the perfect amount of people, the perfect guy, the
Yep.
perfect cake, the perfect honeymoons, everything all perfect. But they were planning for that day, and they weren't planning for beyond. And that's where it is really important. That's why it's important to do this in the early stages,
Yes.
because you want to make sure that you really are actually progressing through a relationship that makes sense, that will you feel confident that if you were to take it to the next level, that you feel confident to go there.
Hmm.
But I watched this, and then I would see them crumble, months later, like
Yeah.
literally, and separate and divorce, and
Yeah.
then end up finding the person now they're married to decades later.
Right.
So it's not rushing the process. And I think that's what happens. You get into that, I'm ready to date, I'm looking, someone shows me interest, I kind of like them. And you're like not allowing yourself to really say, well, is this person really, number one, ready? Are they actually feeling the same way that I am about getting into a relationship? Or are they, like we talked about this, are they just looking for Miss or Mr. in the moment?
Hmm.
Right?
Instead of Mr. or Mrs. Right, they're looking for Mr. or Mrs. Right now.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and so like that's what I think is the scary part is putting yourself out there and
Mm.
asking the question. I brought this up a few weeks ago, I believe, about a young man that I know, young couple that I know that have now been married 10 years. They've been together a little bit longer, but they've now been married 10 years. And in the very beginning, and they were in their 20s, early 20s when they met,
Hmm.
and he knew where he wanted to take his life,
Hmm.
and he took her to a place that was special to him, where he would go to think, where he would imagine what his life would look like. And he took her there, and he started the conversation like, I really like you, I really feel like, you know we could be good together, but here's the thing, this is what I see the future, this is the future that I see.
Hmm.
And laying it all out on the table to possibly, you know to be crushed and be heartbroken. Um, but he did it because he knew it was the right thing for him to do, for the right thing to do in the moment, to make sure, are they feeling it too? It was his
Yeah.
process. Are you feeling it too? Do you see a future with me? Do you see a future with me in the way that I've outlined what I think I would like it to look like? And
Hmm.
they were able to come to an agreement that they both were on the same page. But
Yeah.
it is like courage. I use the word courage, but courage isn't something that you automatically get. It's actually out of fear that, like you were saying, you
Hmm.
do something that makes you courageous. You
Yeah.
do something from your fear that makes you courageous, that you step into and you recognize to ask the question. So
Right.
I was really blown away by it, that someone that was so young was able to actually figure out a way to do this, to go through this process
Hmm.
without, and that was just his way of, figuring out life and making sure that the life partner he chose would be on the same path as him, or the same wavelength. And it doesn't mean that it wouldn't change, but at least in the moment, and making sure, like before we move any further, let's make
Hmm.
sure we're on the same wavelength.
Yeah. Or the other side of that, like you said, that doesn't mean it won't change in the future. But the question isn't so much, do we want to go to the same place? It's, wherever we go, do we want to go together?
Mhm.
Here's where I intend to go. Where do you intend to go? And regardless of what happens, do we want to do that together, even if it changes?
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, is, I wonder oftentimes if courage is not as much choosing to surpass the fear as much like in my situation, it's a competition of fears. And we fear what would happen if we didn't do the thing. Like, you might say it's courageous to jump out of an airplane and parachute to the ground. Well, yeah, but I might fear jumping out of that plane, sure, but I might fear what I would feel like for the rest of my life if I didn't. I might fear what I would feel like when I got to my grave, my dying days, and said I didn't try this thing or these things. I might fear that more than jumping out of the plane, right? So it is a competition of fears. We fear not doing the thing. And sometimes, and that's what it was for me. It was I was scared of not asking. What would happen if I didn't ask? And I wasn't so much scared of not getting the girl. I mean, I was used to rejection, but I was scared of being accused of something because I wanted to act on something, on an interest that I had. Right. Another thing I wanted to bring up too is a lot of times people don't really know what they want. So a lot of times we get into a relationship with somebody and we see the signals, they're clearly interested in us, but they don't they haven't actually consciously sat down and thought, and neither have we in many cases. That's what the last video was about. How do you know you're ready? So sometimes if we get into that conversation and we've done the work, that we've done, asked the questions and sat down and decided this is what I want, how do we know that the person that's on the other side of that table at the restaurant on our first date, how do we know they've done the same work? How do we know they want this? And that's another reason to ask the question,
Mhm.
right? That's another reason to ask the question so that they know, so that we know that they've actually decided this is what I want. Like I said with my last relationship, I asked her, and she gave me a not no, and then a week later, when I went to kiss her on the cheek, she turned her head and kissed me on the mouth, and we ended up, kissing for the rest of the week. Not constantly, but you get the idea. Like we progressed to the next stage, and I assumed that meant we were dating. But I found out a few months later that was an incorrect assumption. Apparently, kissing a girl doesn't mean you're dating. Right? So she hadn't decided that she wanted this. She just hadn't decided she didn't want it. Right? So she was willing to explore it until she decided. And this is how you can know is by asking those questions. And based on their answer or lack of answer, you can decide how to proceed. In my case with her, I specifically decided to proceed in order to give her the information she needed to make the decision. She didn't know yet, so I proceeded carefully and cautiously. We didn't do a lot of the things that many people do in those first few months of dating. We specifically didn't do many of those things. We hung out together, and the most intimate we got, as far as physically, was kissing. Because I wanted to make sure that she felt safe with whatever we did. We went for walks. We did a lot of talking. We went for dinner. We went on dates. We did things like that to explore the possibility. So it was. This is how to find out. This is how you can find out. You can ask them the question, and based on their answer or lack thereof, you can understand where they're coming from. And once you understand where they're coming from, you can make your own decisions from there as to how you want to proceed. Right? If you get a lack of an answer or a vague maybe or a not no, then you can decide, do you want to give somebody the chance to figure it out, or do you want to dive straight in and make the decision for them, or would you rather somebody who knows right off the bat and just you'll move on and find somebody who really knows? Like, I've known different people in each of those situations. Right? Some people they don't want to even go on to the second date unless the person on the other side of the table is absolutely sure this is what they want. Right? And some people don't know what they want either, so they just wing it. and see what happens. And that's not a bad thing. It's just a difficult way to be sure of anything, right? Winging it and seeing what happens is great for those people who prefer not to have a plan. And there are plenty of people like that. So, what is important to you and how you ask these questions and what you do with them is independent to each of us. It's different for each of us. It's based on your values and who you are and what you're looking for. So um, I think that's important to recognize that each of us has our own way of doing it. Because I think asking the question is great, but that's what I think. Not everybody else believes that, and that's okay. Just if I'm dating somebody, I want them to be able to answer that question before we go too far into the relationship. I'm willing to go to a certain shallow level without an answer, but at a certain point, I want them to be able to answer that question, right?
Yeah, I think it's important. I think that you want to know that you're not, I don't know if necessarily wasting your time, because I think it's always, relationships teach you so much about yourself. So you're not necessarily, I would say, wasting your time, but you don't want to invest in a lot of energy in building a relationship that's really not going to be what you hope it to be. Because you could be at that place where you're looking for marriage. Maybe you're looking at, okay, I'm looking for a wife, or I'm looking for a husband. I'm looking to get married soon, so that at some point, because I want us to start a family, like those are my dreams, those are my goals. In the beginning, when I met my husband, before I met him, I thought the person I had been dating previously was the person I was going to marry. And I thought we were going to get married and have a few children. And life was going to be this grand event. Um, that's what I had hoped for. And then I met my husband, and instead, what's really amazing about is that we decided to take our life on the road, meaning we got married in Canada, and then we 6 months later moved to the U.S. And for those of you who don't know me, I am a dual citizen with Canada and U.S. Because I was born in the U.S. but raised in Canada, so I have both citizenships, and it's beautiful because I like being able to have this because they're both a part of me. So for us, we immediately moved, and then we decided, let's decide. We stayed in Florida for 12 years, South Florida, further south from where we are now. And we decided, okay, let's give ourselves a few years into the marriage. We gave ourselves 7 years. If we didn't have children by then, we would revisit it, decide, does it matter, or are we good with how life is? We chose that together. And then we decided, well, we're going to be moving again. And then we started moving a little bit more frequently, and recognized that first of all, we loved the life we were living, where we're getting to live in different places instead of waiting to retire from a job, then to figure out what we could do in retirement age, which a lot of people do. We decided we're not going to wait to retire to enjoy our life. We can work wherever we decide to move to. So that's what we started doing, and living in different places, and ended up being able to live in multiple locations in Canada, to multiple locations in the US, to spending a couple years in a row, uh, 5.5 to 6 months at a time in Mexico. And now we're back here in Central Florida for a few, we're not sure how long we're going to stay here. It might actually become our hub where we'll then travel outwards from. But it was really cool. And I got a different thing from that by us giving ourselves the freedom to explore our marriage, our relationship, and where it was going in the early years, and what we wanted to do, because children would have changed things. It would have been different having children, because I knew that I didn't want to have children and uproot them every 5 minutes, because that's happened to me. not many years when I was younger. And I was extremely unhappy about it because I would have to start over again in a new school district, maybe making new friends, and it was uncomfortable. So I think that it was really, I got a different experience that I'm truly grateful for today because it brought me to what I'm doing today. It brought me this beautiful life that I would never have had otherwise if I had settled for never allowing myself to face fear, a fear such as moving, um, when we first got married and then moving again and then moving again. I was scared at first, but I allowed myself to move through the fear and courageously step into it, even though it didn't feel like courage at the time. It, I look back and say, yeah, I was courageous to do it. Courageous is hindsight. It's not immediately up front. So, yeah, I think that was my experience, and I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I like that, and that's an example of what I was saying earlier. Is sometimes our plans change. Like we sit down and we discuss. This is what I want. This is what you want. This is where we see our lives going, and whether they go there or not, I want to do that with you, right? And we can discuss that. And like you said, at some point, you and your husband sat down and discussed, or at least had some conversation about what your intentions are, right? And that's what unlocked your ability to go further in your relationship, to take your relationship where you wanted it to go, where each of you wanted it to go. Right? It's difficult to take a relationship to the level that you have without these decisions, without this knowledge. Not just the knowledge of where you want your life to go, but the knowledge of where your husband wanted his life to go. And he had to have the knowledge for both of you also. Because when you both knew what each other wanted and what yourselves wanted, that's when you could sit down and have that discussion. This is where we're going. Okay, let's change our mind. Okay, let's change our mind again. Right? You could do that because you both discussed where you wanted to be from your own perspective, and then you know made an effort to understand where the other person wanted to go. Right? You decided to do these things together. And it's not just about deciding to do them together, it's about knowing what it is you're deciding, sitting down and discussing and having a conversation about what it is you're deciding. You know, it's one thing to decide we want kids or we don't want kids, but is that something you actually discuss, or is it just one of you says, "Well, I don't really want kids," and the other one says, "Okay." Or this is where a lot of relationships happen, especially when they get to marriage. Like you were saying, a lot of people just want the marriage. They rush into getting married. They rush into the life together thing. I think what a lot of people do is they don't ask themselves these questions. The questions we asked in the last video and the question we're asking in this video. They don't ask themselves these questions. They don't ask their partner these questions. They just assume that, yeah, we want to be together, so let's get married. I want to be with you, so will you marry me? And oftentimes what we're saying yes to, or what we're asking for, is the fairy tale wedding or the fairy tale honeymoon. What we're asking for is we're asking for somebody to share our life without telling them what our life is, or without asking them what they want their life to be. We're asking them to share our life, but we don't know what they want and they don't know what we want. Right? It's like inviting somebody out to share a picnic, and you're bringing the picnic, but you didn't even prepare the picnic. Right? Like nobody knows what you're eating or if either of you are going to like it. Nobody knows what you're getting into. Nobody knows what life you're sharing if you don't sit down and ask yourself these two questions first. And I think in a lot of cases, people, they find somebody that didn't say no, and I'm kind of attracted to them. Sure, there's some qualities I don't like, but most of the qualities I kind of like. And they said yes, so that's got to be a good thing, right? And then they go from there to, well, if they didn't say no, then maybe I can have my fairy tale wedding with them or my fairy tale honeymoon with them. And it's not the person we're in love with, it's the thought of what I can have now, right? Whether it's the wedding or the honeymoon or the relationship or the marriage or the kids, I can now have this. I know somebody recently who had been engaged for 3 or 4 years, and she was very much looking forward to the wedding, the honeymoon, the kids, the family. The gentleman she was engaged to was from a very large family, and she had been best friends with a couple of people from two different very large families. So she dreamed about having a very large family. Well, that requires her to start somewhere before she's 30. It's difficult to have a large family if you're starting after 30. So she wanted to get married young so that she could have this very large family. So she just said yes to the first guy that asked. Turns out they didn't actually want the same thing. She was a hardcore entrepreneur and wanted to just build her dreams. And he was a very hardcore traditionalist, as a lot of big families are. And he wanted to have a career, and he wanted her to have a traditional career as well. So they didn't, like, some of their basic values didn't work out, and they never discussed those things, or rather they did, but rather than being honest, they just kind of said yes to what the other person wanted. So oftentimes either we or the person across the table from us doesn't even know. And if that's the case, then I would caution you, our audience, to be careful about how deep you go in that relationship. Um, as I mentioned earlier, it's okay to explore certain levels of relationship with somebody who doesn't know, because maybe they can't know until they get to a certain point in the relationship. Maybe they just need to discern a little bit or figure it out or decide. That's fine, but make sure you don't commit to a lifetime together until those questions are answered. That's my suggestion, because we could really end up with some difficult situations that it's difficult to get out of. We could end up with kids with somebody that we only kind of like. We could end up, having a messy divorce when we probably shouldn't have been married in the first place. Right? A lot of the people that I know who have gone through messy divorces, or who are having to deal with children as separated parents, a lot of them didn't know they wanted to be together. They just, nobody else was on the plate right now, so why not? And that's why you and I put some of these videos together, is to help people really understand, like, to really ask themselves the questions. A lot of these videos we were coming at from the perspective of a busy professional woman, but this applies to everybody. It's easy to say yes to somebody. It's harder to say yes to what they want. But it becomes easier again if you know that they want the same thing you want, or at least something similar to what you want. And those are conversations that, like you had with your husband. That's what causes success. That's why you're 27 years into this marriage, because you've had those conversations, not just once, but several times with your husband. You've had them over the years, and you've had them even recently, I'm sure of it.
Mm-hmm.
So this is how you get there.
Yeah, and yeah, it's so important because over time things change. You might have your desires might change. The things that you want for your life might change. You might have started out one place, and then all of a sudden, years later, you're like, you know what? I actually desire to do this instead. And so it's again having those conversations to make sure you're on the same page. Doesn't mean just because you found that right person today and you end up being together and it's going well that things life won't change for them, their perspective, your perspective. And forcing someone to want what you want doesn't help. Getting married, if you're not on the same page, won't fix your relationship. Having children, if you're not on the same page to have children, is not going to fix the situation if one person really is not pro children. Or and I mean when I say not pro children, they're just not pro children for your relationship. They decided after the fact, they decided they really don't want kids. After you've been together for a while, they've decided, yeah, you know what, I really don't want kids because now things are changing. And especially, and that can happen at any point in your relationship because even if you're married, that could happen. So it's
Yeah.
being open to have these conversations throughout. But in the beginning, to really make sure if you're going to pursue a relationship, it's important to at least start somewhere to make sure that they have the same values as you have, that they're on, they desire life at least a little bit similar enough to yours that you're willing to go a little bit further and explore the relationship. And if someone is like, really, I'm not really sure, that then that then becomes a decision for you. Do I
Yeah.
like this person enough to give them a little bit more time to see if they're the right fit? Because that means you're investing your time, you're investing your emotions, and the
Yes.
possibility of it not working out. So
Right.
these are things you have to ask, and we live in such a we're living in a world now where people are more aware of asking questions, you know,
Hmm.
their emotions,
Yeah.
are we on the same page? Being an entrepreneur or being a traditionalist and having a career. We're now so much more open about it, but it still doesn't mean that in a relationship that you're because you are aware of that the worldly views now on things doesn't mean that in the relationship that you're automatically going to start thinking about those things because it takes the it takes you really wanting to know the answers to these questions and allowing yourself to push through the fear of asking and maybe not getting the answers that you want so that you can then if it's not the person you can then move on to finding the person and
Yeah.
not spending so much time.
Right.
But it takes time and it takes effort and you know dating is
It's
is is not it's sort of like work in a way because you have to treat it as sort of like an interview like we've been talking about. You're making sure that you can check the boxes that are really important to you,
yes.
and being okay that if some of those boxes go unchecked that you're not so rigid looking for perfection rather than looking for the right fit.
Yes. Yeah. And as we've mentioned a few times, I really wanted to focus on this point at the end as we come to a close. It's okay if they're not sure. That doesn't mean you have to end the relationship. It might mean you want to end the relationship, but we're not giving you the advice that you should end the relationship. We're only suggesting that you use that to make a choice, right? Some people don't want to take that time and investment and invest in somebody who's unsure. If that's you, then your choice is to move on. If you'd rather give them the chance to explore and discover, then put some limits on how far you're willing to go, how deep into the relationship you're willing to go. Maybe you don't move in with each other. Maybe you don't go back to somebody's house at the end of the date, right? Maybe you don't introduce your family or whatever the case may be until those decisions are made. And then you can decide once those decisions are made, you can decide, Okay, well, this is going to work or this isn't going to work, right? That just if you're not sure, then put some limits. But at the same time, if you're not sure, maybe you don't go any further. Maybe your limit is, I want you to know, right? And back to last video, make sure that you know also, right? It's a combination of the two. Both sides have to have a decision before you can really have a good life together. So it's important that you don't go beyond a certain place, and you can decide how far that is until there's a decision. So I think we've covered what we need to cover on this topic. I think we've said all the things that we have left to say. Um, I think it's been a great conversation, and thank you to our audience, to our viewers, for watching. This you're who we do this for. You're why we do this at all. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. Um, Please like and subscribe, like the video, because when you like it, when you press that like button, it shows YouTube that people want to hear or see what we've got going, and it helps YouTube discover or decide who else gets to see it and to show it to more people. So thank you for watching. Thank you for helping to spread the word, and we'll see you next time. I'll let you close us out, Leslie.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you, Andy, for another wonderful conversation. I actually really enjoyed this one today a
Me too.
lot. And I think you're right. We really covered a lot. I hope that this resonated and helped some of our viewers at least. And if you have any questions or something, you want to like us to dive into something, you have any questions around it, please be sure to reach out to us. You can find our information in the about section. You can reach out to us by email and we'll respond. Definitely, though, share this around. If there's somebody in your life right now who needs to hear this, that they could be a serial dater and they're not really sure why things are not working out, this could possibly help them this series. So until next week, we hope that you have a wonderful weekend. We hope you enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you here next Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern. Bye for now.
Bye bye, everybody.